Hi everybody, and welcome to the latest webinar by the PMO Specific Interest Group of the APM. I'm the chair of the group, Emma Arnath-Pemberton, and as most of you probably already know, the APM PMO SIG exists to bring PMO to the forefront of project management, and we do that through events like this, articles, PMO wisdom interviews, as well as face-to-face events that we're starting again, hopefully in the new year. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the future. It's a good time of year to do that, and to do that I'm joined, and I'm very grateful to be joined by John Edmonds from PeopleCert. Some of you might know them as Axelos, but they are transitioning to become PeopleCert. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Emma. Yes, and hello everyone. John Edmonds, and as Emma said, I work for PeopleCert. I did work for Axelos. I joined Axelos about 6 years ago, something like that. And it was 2.5 years ago, I think, that PeopleCert acquired Axelos and all the intellectual property around that, Prince2, ITIL, and so on. Before joining Axelos and PeopleCert, I spent quite a number of years as a project management trainer and consultant. And before that, as an actual project manager. I got into project management totally by accident, which is not an unusual route, is it really? And I think back to those early days of trying to run a project and at the same time establish a project culture in the organisation, and what I wouldn't have given for a PMO at that point around to make that happen. It was at times that was quite a lonely thing as a project manager, but that was a long time ago now. So I'm now with PeopleCert as what they call a PPM architect, and giving shape to the products and the new versions of the products. So it's great to be here. Thank you, Emma.
Amazing. Thank you so much, John, and thank you for being with us. Thank you, everybody. I know it's the week before Christmas, believe it or not, so I'm very grateful that you've chosen to join us at lunchtime. So what are we going to be talking about today? I mentioned the future. It's a good time of year to kind of reflect on, what's happened this year, what does the future look like? And we know over the past couple of years, we've seen significant changes in organizations, including, the way that we operate as organizations and individuals. There's been real shift in cultural change within organizations since the rise from, in many cases, analog to digital, and the way that we actually work. So what we wanted to do today was talk about some of the trends that we're seeing in the industry, and specifically looking at a couple of things that you probably have heard about, one of those being the brand new Prince2. So for those of you that know and love Prince2, there is a new version, and we're going to get John to talk about that in just a second. But I thought it would be worth, first of all, chatting about some of the trends that we've seen. And I don't know about you, John, but from my perspective, I spend quite a lot of my time doing the Axelos or PeopleCert P3M3 assessment. And one of the key things that we found is the attitude towards risk has really changed. It's really kind of going from something that we do because of project management to more of a strategic discipline and endeavour. And I don't know if maybe the pandemic helped with that. Not very many people had it on their risk register, I would wager. So I think people have figured out that actually risk management could really help us to not feel some of the pains again. I don't know what your view is on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think risk management is such an interesting topic because for years it's been one of those tick box exercises that we needed to do. You're a project manager, so therefore you need a risk register or a risk log, and you do those things, but there's no real sense for many of really owning that and seeing it as a positive thing. And I think there is a evidence of a change of culture here that we need to do it. Yes, we need to look at the threats, but we also need to look at the opportunities as well. And even the negative side, looking at the threats, can actually enhance the value that we're bringing to our projects and programs anyway, can't it? I remember a couple of years ago when we launched the latest version of management of risk, lots of really positive, interesting conversations with people in helping to shape that and talk about a positive risk culture that's needed, and there are signs of that happening now.
Yeah, definitely. And I've seen that. I think it historically would definitely come out in the assessment, the P3M3 assessment, as an area for work, in terms of there's a recommendation here that this needs to be better. And it's almost changing the mindset from we do risk management for projects to actually risk management should inform our projects. And that's not just in choosing the projects, but how we plan for them, and what we are actually planning to do in terms of the approaches, and the outcomes that we're expecting. And it's really interesting that you say that that focus on opportunity. You know, the pandemic was a horrendous situation, and yet lots of organizations have found positives in that. So it would have been interesting to see, for those companies that did have it on their register, like how many opportunities and risks actually came to light for them. So it's interesting that, yeah, this is something that's really starting to pick up speed, I think, as a strategic discipline for organizations. I remember years ago when I did my MOR, I went back to my business and I was very excited about risk, and I'm a bit of a risk geek anyway. And I remember asking the organization, like, what's our risk strategy? And they said, we insure against what we can, and everything else we just kind of deal with. And I'm not sure if that's classed as a strategy, but it worked at the time. It worked for several years for those guys. So yeah, it's interesting to see the rise of the importance of it, and how much it is growing, in terms of something that we want to focus on. The other thing that we wanted to talk about, and it's a bit of an obvious one, is there is a brand new Prince 2, which is super exciting. And I know John's just prepared a couple of slides with just some of the key changes and messages to talk through to give you guys an overview of the brand new Prince 2. So I think we're going to let John share his screen for a second, so that we can actually just, talk through that, because that might lead to some key questions from the people who are on the call today, about what this means for their PMOs specifically.
Great, thanks Emma. Let me share the screen then. Yeah, this has been a really interesting journey to get this new edition of Prince 2 out, and we did go back to basics, and we did a lot of consultation, a lot of research to find out what was working and what wasn't working. And I won't go into all of that, but it has shaped what we have got now. This Prince 2 has got a real sort of different focus. So we've concentrated on the 5 elements of the method, which should be seen together as a sort of an integrated whole, so that we can really apply Prince 2 well, appropriately, intelligently, and so on. So here's the 5 integrated elements. We've got people in the middle there. We've got a project context, which is all about understanding what your project is. And the one thing I'd say here is that what we want to encourage people to do is to adapt and flex Prince 2 to meet the context. It's not about saying Prince 2 is rigid and you have to shape your project to meet Prince 2. So, that's clearly the wrong way of doing it. But it's interesting, the messages that get out over the years that Prince 2 is very big and rigid and inflexible, when it's just the opposite. So it's about shaping Prince 2 to the context. It's about having people at the middle. It's a set of practices and processes. Those are the core things that make up the journey of a project and the things we do in that journey. And underpinning everything are 7 principles of Prince 2. The principles, well, let me just say something about people first. Having people in Prince 2 is something we've never done before, and yet it was the major message that was coming out in the research. If we don't understand people, if we don't focus on people, how can we have a successful project? That was the message we were getting. We had nowhere to go with this. We had to have people in there. And for many of us, this was about time, really. We should do this. We've looked at people internally. How do we lead successful teams? We've looked at people outside the project, stakeholders. How do we help an organization lead successful change? And tying all that together, we talk about communication. As I say, underpinning everything in Prince 2 are the 7 principles. And if you know Prince 2, then you'll recognize the principles. They've carried forward. We've tweaked some of the language, but essentially we've got the same seven principles, which I do believe are really powerful ones. In that we identified those some years ago, and they've carried forward, and they are really what it means to be using Prince 2 on a project. We've got 7 practices, which used to be called themes. Themes was never a very strong word. Practices is far more positive, it's far more active. And these are the sort of things that we would do across a project. We've already mentioned risk, plans, of course, quality, organising, business case. All the classic ones are still there. They've been treated differently in that we've restructured those chapters, and I think they're a better read now, and there's a consistency across the 7 practices. We've then got the process model that Prince 2 has had for a number of years. The process names have not changed, the relationships have not changed, but the way we describe them has, and we have we've tightened up some of the descriptions. We've given a clearer focus to the processes. We have expressed them differently, and we've done a lot of cross-referencing as well between the processes, the practices, and the principles, so that people are able to understand that this is an integrated method, as I said. So there's those 5 areas all working together. Some new content on sustainability, some really interesting stuff around that, even including sustainability as one of our performance targets. That's a new performance target to supplement time and cost, scope and quality, and so on. We're saying more about data and digital, and we're introducing the whole area of artificial intelligence. There's reference to it in the core book, but then there's also supporting help for those people who want to get to grips with AI. And we're also trying to address this thing about delivery methods. And if you use LinkedIn, if you're part of any project group on LinkedIn, you'll see regular arguments and discussions about agile and waterfall and so on. Those are not project management methods, are they? Those are delivery methods. Those are ways of creating products. So we want to make it absolutely clear that Prince 2 is a project management method, and that whatever your choice of delivery methods, Prince 2 can work with it and give us that overarching governance that every project needs. So we've tried to make that absolutely clear. Prince 2 is not waterfall. That's not a relevant discussion to have. Prince 2 is all about project management and managing and directing projects. Overall, we feel we've improved it. We have reduced the page count, and yet there's more content. So the way we've done that is we've taken out things that don't support the core method. So more for less. By taking out the things that distract, we've reduced the cognitive load, so it's easier for people to get to grips with it, to use it, and to prepare for exams. We've got some fictional scenarios in there which give us different types of project, and those are spread throughout the book. I've talked about signposting between the elements so that they support each other, and we want this to be used intelligently. So we have taken out any minimum rules that were there in the previous edition, and this is this enhances the flexibility and the tailorability of Prince 2. Okay, clearly I could talk for a while about that, but let me stop at that point.
Thank you for that, John.
Okay.
So as a PMO specialist, some of the things that make me really happy are people front and center. I think that is a massive change. Anybody that knows me or follows me knows about, I'm all about human first. So talk to the human before you talk to the role. So I think having people at the heart, I think from a PMO perspective, is going to really drive that focus, which maybe has been a missing layer for many PMOs, where we're so focused on the way that we do things as opposed to the who. The other things that make me really happy are the distinction between process and practice. That the process is an input to good project management practice. And I think making that distinction really, really helps as well, so that we're not just, people, process, tools focused as we used to be. Like, actually practice is in there as well. And really honing in on that flexibility. And I love that it isn't waterfall, it is a method that will allow you, it's a framework that will allow you and is flexible enough. So I think for me, from a PMO perspective, it can really help PMOs to kind of start to refocus where they've been putting the effort, and maybe taking a long, hard look at themselves as to, actually, if Prince 2, which has been around forever and is like the best practice, can change, then maybe it's time for some PMOs to change as well. Have you seen, I know it's still fairly new, have we seen a lot of interest since this was released from a PeopleCert perspective?
We have, yes, lots of feedback. We did lots of consultation and reviews as we were going through, and listening to the feedback from the reviews was interesting, because some people who at the beginning said, oh no, you shouldn't have people in Prince 2, when they saw how we tackled it, they're saying, no, you're right, that's fitting in nicely. It's not just like a bolt-on bit, it is central to what we're doing. And since the launch, across the world, there's been lots of interest. We're actually having it translated into more languages than ever before, and we're doing that quicker than has been done in the past. So I think it's one of the benefits of having been acquired by PeopleCert, a larger organisation, more prepared to invest in things like Prince 2 quicker than ever before. So I've been quite impressed in that sense that's going on, and countries or languages that didn't have it in their own language before are really getting sort of quite excited about that. So that's very good.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really, really cool. So that's the new Prince 2. So again, pop any questions in the chat if you do have questions for John at the end. It would be reticent of us to have this conversation without then talking a little bit about the state of PMO. And obviously, from a PeopleCert perspective, we have the P30 manual that lots of PMOs kind of use. And we've seen that, certainly since the pandemic, we've seen a much more raised profile, I would say, of PMO, where many are kind of enjoying being a little bit more strategic, maybe getting more involved in prioritization and defining the future for organizations. And largely that, I think, has come from kind of becoming almost the calm in the chaos, when everything, needed to stop and change very quickly. And we found that actually our PMOs were quite adaptable, and they were able to kind of keep things going by being pragmatic, removing the levels of governance that maybe we didn't need necessarily. And that's had an impact on, how quickly PMOs have been able to evolve. I know that we've had people through the P3M3 assessment that have, moved from one level of maturity to another much quicker, because of, this opportunity, I guess you could say, and the raised profile that's come with it. So what's your view on, P30? Is it still something that is there for PMOs of today? Is there a plan in the future to kind of review it?
Yeah, first of all, I'd say it's overdue a review, isn't it? And I'll be really honest about that. It's one of those things that hasn't really been looked at for a number of years, and it is due to do that. No promises, but again, I'm getting the impression that there'll be investment in the other products. People sort of gone big with Prince 2, and that's the right thing to do. It's a huge product. It's very, very important that we get that right. I think we have. now the others that surround it also will need to be looked at. So there's resourcing going in to sort of look at strategically what happens, and I'd love that to be on the cards soon. So hopefully that will be the case, and the others as well. Managing portfolios, that's in need of. There's some good stuff in there, but it's just in need of bringing up to the level of Prince 2 and MSP and so on now. So.
Yeah, and I think it has that kind of the ways of working, the natural evolution's been kind of enhanced almost by the situations of the last few years, where like historically it takes a lot longer for us to change the way that we work, to change the way we think about how do we build and manage and track the benefits of our portfolios. We know through research that we went from annual planning to almost quarterly, if not monthly, planning and reprioritizing of projects for our portfolios for a significant amount of time. So I think it's probably accelerated that natural evolution, hasn't it? Which kind of puts you guys in a bit of a weird situation where it's like, we know we need to change, but actually everything has a logical order to it, I guess.
It does, and the cycle of change in the guidance it's been quite a long time, hasn't it? There's quite a few years between updates, and I don't think we can afford to continue to do that. I think that it needs to be, we need to be responding at the same sort of rate. Perhaps not quarterly, but we need to be looking at something that's more easily updated and so on. So yeah, that's true. It's been a really interesting time, hasn't it? The changes have created something really quite good in a sense, and one of those, as you said earlier on, is the more strategic elements of PMOs. That there is that going on now, and organisations have come back around to recognising the value of it, which is great. We can talk some more about that as well in a moment.
Yeah, and I think in terms of value, what's fascinating is I've spoken to a couple of people recently who are like, we actually need to just stop, because we got into quite a good place during that initial time where we were able to prioritize and make decisions quickly, and the world did not end. And we were able to remove some layers of governance, and the world did not end. Projects still got delivered. And now it's kind of some organizations and some teams are kind of trying to almost revert back to type and kind of start slowing down decision making, maybe being a little bit reticent to just skip that and move on, because actually we're confident. So it's almost that reporting by exception, which was kind of really heightened, and then lots of organizations are now saying, oh, we're slipping back and we're losing the collaboration aspect that had to happen. It was kind of really forced on us. So I think, definitely for PMOs it's an interesting time where we might have the delivery teams going, that was great, I felt like I had a lot more autonomy and I still delivered, whereas we might have the senior people who are like, no, control again. So it's a bit of a funny time, I think, for PMOs, whilst the positive is that we are having much more strategic conversations, like you say.
Yeah indeed.
And then one of the other things that you talked about that's in the new Prince 2 is data and AI. Do PeopleCert see, have they done some research? Do we have any information about what we think AI and how it's going to impact everything that we do, and kind of the use of data? Are we going to get better at it? Or are we all still a bit scared that Terminator is going to take over?
This is probably the big topic, isn't it, really? What does this mean? Lots of experts popping up all of a sudden. So we need to be careful that we approach this carefully. But there was a quote I read from I think it was Harvard just recently, and it said, AI won't replace humans, but humans with AI will replace humans without AI. So it was an interesting idea of saying, okay, look, there's a lot we can get from this. We're still needed in this, but how we needed and what we bring to the party is going to change. There's There's a lot more data around than ever before. We've been building that up over the years. We've not been great at using it. And things like lessons learned. That's always been the classic thing, hasn't it? We push lessons learned out at the end of a project, and they don't go anywhere. And something that imprints too, we're saying here is don't push it out. Pull it in at the start. Use it. Use the lessons that you've got personally and organisationally, and bring those in. So let's not waste the data now. Where AI can come in is an incredible positive use of that data, freeing up human beings to do the more value-added stuff around people, around change management, around strategic intervention, and so on. And so there's lots there, but we've got to engage in it. That's what we've been finding in our research, consulting with people who really are experts in AI. They're saying very similar things, and so we have created something that's available on the Axelos platform. Not quite sure how it's available, but it's a paper about using AI with Prince2. So we've brought in a couple of people who've written that for us, and that's now available. I think it's through the membership side of things. So it's seeking that guidance, but it's not being afraid to go and try things, is it really? That's what we've got to do.
And I think that's the key in terms of trends for 2024. If we talk about the things that we're seeing, AI absolutely is the big topic, and it's almost that thing of, if we don't use it, it won't, like, it's not ready. But if we don't use it, it won't be ready, because that's the whole point, is it continues to learn. So it almost needs us to engage with it a little bit more, maybe start trying to play with it so that it actually learns. I know we did a bit of a test within our company to try and get it to write an article about PMO, and it kind of confused PMO with project manager. And then we read it back, and it was like, I'm not sure what this is about. So it's fascinating that then, as we continue to kind of utilize it and provide the feedback and the insight and ask the right questions, that it will continue to learn. But it will only do that, it will only become a value-adding tool if we actually engage. And I think the risk there for 2024 is that organizations, typically, we're not, specifically big organizations, we're not great at, being early adopters of brand new technology, because there are lots of other concerns, security. We know that there are organizations already starting to block certain things from being used. Like, what happens with our data? If we're trying to teach something, then we've got to share that information. So there's a security concern there. There's also the whole aspect around how and where do we use it, and how do we know? So I know lots of people are just writing lots of articles and blogs using, like, ChatGPT is probably the most commonly known one, but they're not kind of adding this is also the human perspective. So there's an element of, should our business cases be wholly written by AI, or should we be adding that human experience? And I love that quote from Harvard around, it's not going to replace people, but it will replace people without AI. And it's about harnessing that to really add value. So from a PMO perspective, that trend is going to be around data, isn't it? It's like the amount of time that PMOs spend just collating information, and that time collating could be moved out of the way to spend some valuable time on insights and trends and real recommendations. So it's about harnessing that, isn't it, rather than just kind of applying it to everything, I guess, which could be quite dangerous in some ways.
That's right. And someone said, I think it was one of the universities in the UK who've been studying this, are saying that there are certain things that at the moment AI is not too clever at, and one of those was around risk management. It was about identifying risks, and if you ask it to identify risks, and knowing that risks are always something in the future, it will then invent a whole range of risks that aren't really risks. So it will go into that hallucination thing and invent things. And yet it's far stronger and better at looking at responses to risk once we've identified them. So it's understanding where to use it as we start to take those early steps into it.
Yeah, and I guess when it's, like you say, looking into the future, it doesn't know what it hasn't been told, I guess, on some level. So if we haven't experienced something, it is just going to try and bring everything in. And I guess this then leads us nicely into the whole benefits realization conversation, doesn't it? Of, you know, how likely are we to be able to utilize this kind of technology to extrapolate out, you know, and do some of the estimating for us, you know, where I know that in like the APM exams, there's something like the different types of estimating, and maybe this will become one type of, let's use what everybody else has put out there in the world and their experience to try and estimate whether we're actually going to achieve certain outcomes. Like, what's almost the probability of
it? yeah, that sounds that does sound an appropriate thing to do, doesn't it? As you say, the training of it and helping it to learn the appropriate things is going to be the real challenge about what we can share and what we don't want to share. But yeah, there's plenty there. There are whole lists of things that we think it can do straight away.
Yeah, definitely. It's a fascinating world at the moment when it comes to that and the world of PMO, because there is that fear, isn't there, of, oh, are we just gonna get rid of project managers and PMO? And actually, if we harness it well, it will just allow us to spend the time. But I think there's always going to be a need for the human element to validate what it's telling us, rather than just kind of blindly following what a tool effectively is telling you. It's almost it's a tool, not a rule.
Yes,
the stuff that it spits out.
And I think that some of the other things that we've already briefly mentioned, the idea of PMOs becoming more strategic. I mentioned change management as part of Prince 2 now. These are all related together, aren't they? The rise of AI, the need for greater and more effective change management, and the strategic input that PMOs can give. Those are not separate things. They're all part and parcel of the same thing. And so if instead of the old-fashioned view that PMOs are just about tracking timelines and creating reports, you know all the stuff that people used to think. If we're saying, okay, that's being handled, we've got the proper data analytics approach to that. The PMOs are therefore giving the guidance on what it all means, and also being a centre. This idea of centre of excellence, which was language we were using some years ago, but it can be a real centre of excellence, can't it? And giving guidance on not just on projects but on change as well.
Yeah, and then like you say, it's all kind of connected. It's closing the loop, which is why I think, in terms of, you know, if we think about what is next year, what are PMOs going to be talking about? I think AI, definitely. I think the new Prince 2 actually really helps us to focus in on the other trends that we're seeing around, focus more on people and the change and the impact of change, focus more on what does the practice look like, as opposed to just, have I got pretty processes that are in there. But I also think, and I don't know if you've seen this trend, I think benefits realizations and objectives and key results are going to be key in 2024 as well for PMOs too. And this is not about becoming experts overnight. This is about, we need to start embracing this and learning about it. So I guess that development aspect is going to be really key for PMO teams to be able to really kind of support the organizations of the future. Yeah,
indeed. A colleague of mine went to a conference in America just a few weeks ago, a major conference there, and it was interesting. His analysis of the talks and the seminars was a move away from things that we've seen for a number of years, such as agile this and agile that, into more, okay, how are we tackling AI? but what about the impacts on the organisation and benefits realisation and the people side of things and the actual value of what's being delivered? So yes, there is. I think we can see that happening in a number of places now. That's where the conversation needs to go, and be led by PMOs.
And that's a fundamental shift, I think. Whereas before it was very much the benefit is owned by the business, and actually now PMOs, we're seeing that PMOs are facilitating that process. They might not be owning the end benefit, but they're certainly facilitating the conversation and the process, because we're kind of acknowledging on a number of levels that the people that are supposed to own the benefits, they're too busy, or they don't have the experience or the education in some cases to be able to do that effectively. So we're seeing, again, this is kind of elevating PMOs to more of that strategic level to be able to have conversations truly about benefits realization, which is I think that's a real mindset shift for organizations, whereas before it would just kind of hand over and then the whole thing just dies, as opposed to now where it's like 6 months later the PMO might knock on the door and say, hey, we finished this project, you've been tracking this information, let's get some insights as to what actually happened.
Yeah and the way it's always been is that, of course, projects don't deliver benefits, they facilitate the delivery of benefits. And so we always expect that the business will be the place where benefits are realized, and so they take responsibility for that. And as you said, but that doesn't happen because they're so busy trying to cope with business as usual that the actual implementation of the change, turning outputs into outcomes, all of that is not happening. And who gets the blame for that? Well, probably the projects get the blame for that, because they've obviously delivered the wrong thing and they've not been good enough. So bridging that gap is a very difficult thing, and that's exactly how to do it, I think. And again, let's all point it back to the PMO. They can make this happen.
Yeah, and there's something there as well when we were talking about education is going to be key for PMOs. I think there's something there about educating everybody else as well, like how we can't just grab benefits realization, AI or whatever, train the PMO and expect everybody else to just magically get it. We need to make sure that there's relevant and appropriate education for not just the project delivery teams, but people who are contributing to projects. And there's something there around sponsorship as well. That's something that we found. I spend quite a lot of time with sponsors, and we've always made an assumption that, like, if you're a senior person, you automatically know how to sponsor a project and what the expectation is. So I think, again, that centre of excellence term that you used it isn't just about supporting the project managers, it's about supporting everybody that's involved in projects. And we've quite often forgotten those different layers, I think, which is where when we see that in Prince 2 with the directing projects and managing projects and things like that, the different layers, but we quite often forget that, I think, on a day-to-day.
This is a massive step into stakeholder engagement for PMO, isn't it? Really, to recognise that lots of people have got to be influenced here. They've got to be educated. They've got to be taken on this journey to really pick up their various roles. And you're right about sponsors. Some shocking stories about sponsors just not understanding what their role is. It's more than attending a monthly meeting, isn't it? It's something
absolutely
way beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Well, I can see, I've just opened the chat and I can see we've got quite a few questions. So I think it's probably a good idea to go to that. And so we'll see how challenging they are. We'll go through. So we've got some comments like, this sounds really good. My work involves lots of participation and engagement and needs to measure and deliver sustainability. So the new Prince 2 kind of is exciting for people. How does Prince 2.7 compare with PMP from PMI? So for those organizations that are working outside of, in more US based, I guess, which is where kind of PMP started, but obviously it is also a worldwide qualification. Have you done some analysis as to, how and if it should align to PMP? If they should talk to each other?
Yeah, okay. This alignment thing is a really interesting one. We have to remember that Prince 2 and PMI are two different things. They're offering two different things. Prince 2 is a method telling us how to run a project from beginning to end. PMI offers a body of knowledge. And so a body of knowledge has got all these different things that project managers could be expected to know. We don't aim to cover those in Prince 2. We aim to give this story of a project, which is what PMI doesn't do. So the two things are and have always been complementary. But of course, that doesn't suit the narrative in some organizations because they want to choose one or the other. And the reality is that both of them together give us a really great combination. So they are doing different things. I guess Prince 2 has a lower barrier to entry in terms of comparing it with PMP, because PMP is really for those established project managers who can demonstrate thousands of hours of work, whereas Prince 2 you don't need that, and it's helpful to people who are coming into project management or occasional project managers, as well as professional project managers. So alignment is possibly a holy grail that's not worth pursuing, really, because they are different.
They're two different things.
And there is some different. The concepts are the same. Language is different, and again, American language is different to UK English. So
totally. Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to kind of position it. And that is the age-old argument in project management, isn't it? It's either waterfall or agile or this or that, and it always seems to be on like both either side of the scale. You're either here or you're here, but there's if you're in between, you're doing something wrong. And I think for me that's a really good way to position it, that actually all this stuff should complement each other, and just because we have one doesn't mean we can't use the other. And we've been having an argument between traditional waterfall and agile or iterative, and I think that is a really, really important message, that you don't have to be wholly in one camp, that not everything works for everything. A little bit more complicated because we almost have to be able to converse in different languages to some degree, but it also adds that flexibility that sometimes it makes sense to do things in a more iterative way, and other times it makes sense to do things in a more waterfall traditional way, however you decide to call it. Okay. With the rise of change management being brought into Prince 2, we've got a question here around, can it be applied to program management then, or is that still considered, it's a separate discipline? Because that's one of the key differentiators between Prince 2 and MSP, was change management is a key thing with a change manager for the program, etc. So can Prince 2 be translated easier now, or is it still seen or considered as two separate things?
That's a really good point. I would, because of the way we've treated it in Prince 2, we've not addressed the role of the business change manager. We've not gone into that territory, because that's taking it to a different level again in MSP. So what we've done is talked about some of the concepts of change management. We introducing people has been a challenge to us, because we thought, well, this is a massive topic. How can we do that and keep it at the right size? So we've been quite disciplined, and we've talked more about the need to do things rather than necessarily how you're going to do it by using Business Change Manager. And we've not introduced any of the sort of change management models of that. We use we'll use some of the MSP language a little bit in terms of current state and target state, that sort of blueprint or target operating model language, but we don't sort of do. We've not really crossed over into MSP. We've kept it
separate.
Separate. That's the word.
Yeah. And in the same kind of vein, we have a kind of agile question where, agile is created to effectively manage rapid changes. How does the new Prince 2 manage that? But I guess that's the kind of slight nuance between Prince 2 and Prince 2 Agile, maybe?
Yeah, Prince 2 Agile, which of course we will need to look at as well soon. But Prince 2 Agile gives this sort of light overview of Prince 2, and then shows you where you could use all the different agile techniques, agile artifacts, and so on, and where they would fit in. you would then, of course, need to understand what type of project running, how quick it is, what the sort of speed and the pace you need to go through it at. So you've still got to tailor Prince 2 whatever. Prince 2 Agile does currently help sort of make that transition, particularly for the project manager who needs the language of the Agile developers and so on. So it helps to make that transition. And we'll continue to do that. So we'll be looking at Prince 2 Agile.
Yeah, cool. One of the other questions is around sustainability. So we know this is a trend across, not just for PMOs, but across organizations, that we need to deal with the sustainability aspect. But as an individual PMO team, many don't have the ability to influence everything our organization does to make sustainable, responsible decisions, I guess. So how are we handling that in the future? What's the recommendation? We can't necessarily change everything that the business does, but we can probably be a bit more responsible in the conversations that we're having, maybe.
That's almost a replica of the discussions that go on across the world, isn't it? Saying, well, look, if this country doesn't do it, why should I do it? And so, but we've got to start somewhere. We've all got to sort of make an impact. So what we talk about are how can we ensure that the way that we run our project is more sustainable? So that's the running of the project. How can we ensure that the products that we create are sustainable? And then, and this is going up to a strategic level, how can we ensure that the projects that we engage in are the right projects for the sustainability of the business? Now, for some of those, we can be involved. For others, maybe we won't have the influence to determine. But there's a possibility that we could, but they're all on the table there. Sustainability is not going away, and it won't. It's not a passing fad. We know from the difficult conversations that the COP conference has had this week that this is a long-term thing, and it will be different for different organisations at different degrees and different aspects of sustainability that they have to address. But we have to intervene where we can and do as much as we can.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, lots of challenges here, but it's on the table now.
Yeah, definitely. And another question is around looking at teams. How do we deal with the benefit of diversity within a project team? Do you guys, have you got any research around, having different types of people, different cultures in a team? Is that addressed, or is that more kind of on the maybe leadership side?
Yes, it is addressed, and the need for what's that all saying? If you want to travel fast, you travel alone, but if you want to go far, you do it in a team. There's something like that, isn't it? And a lot of the change management models will talk about a more diverse team. Will take longer, perhaps, to get to the right conclusion, but it'll be the better one than smaller teams. So if I replicate the team based on my personality and my style, it'll just be me really several times over. But we don't need that. So that's touched on, and we did bring in a people expert to write the people chapter and to look at the organising chapter as well about the roles, and bring in a different perspective, so to make sure that we do understand that the role of diversity is not just again another tick box. It's something that contributes to better outcomes eventually.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, and then the last couple of questions, we've got a few of these because we've got some comments as well, which I'll go through, but the last kind of grouping of questions, I guess we could call them, is around the qualification itself. So, what is the plan in terms of, do we have to go and do Prince 2.7 as a brand new thing? Is there a different entry? Can we still bank CPD points against the 6th edition certification? ahead of people's lapse date? Is there any guidance in terms of how do I get from 6 to 7 as an individual?
Okay. Yeah, if you've got the 6th edition, let me get this right. There's been quite a few changes in the sort of continuous development and logging points as well. And there's also an interesting development that's come out of PeopleCert recently, that yes, you do need to refresh qualification sort of every 3 years, but there are different ways of doing that. And
Okay.
your qualification, say a Prince 2 qualification, can be refreshed by actually taking a different exam. So you could take MOR if you haven't got MOR. Mm-hmm. If you take anything within the suite of the PPM products, it automatically upgrades. It upgrades you on the ones that you've already got. So that's a nice sort of. There's a number of ways of tackling it. If you were coming in, if you'd already got Prince 2 practitioner at 6, and you wanted to do 7, you could just do that at practitioner level. If you've only got foundation, it's probably best to do foundation at 7 because of changes and things. So, a number of different ways, and the training providers will be able to sort of talk you through those in detail.
We've just had one added around. I'm trained on 6, but I now need to sit my exam. So has the exam already changed?
It has, yes. It
has. Yeah. So they need to work with the training provider really to kind of figure out how they're going to do that. Okay. Yeah. And is there a place where people can go to find out more information about like these kind of questions and answers if they want more information or need some help?
The Axelos website is still there. So axelos.com is the place where there'll be instructions and guidance on that. So yeah, have a look on there. And there's certification pages will take you to the right place.
Okay, amazing. Thank you for that, John. So just some additional comments. I don't know if we have any responses. So regarding the topic of AI, Elon Musk does assert that ultimately AI will replace humans. I'm just going to leave that there. Not going to get into that one. And then we have, it looks like AI has already written and published a book called PMO 3.0. So we'll have to do a search for that and see if it relates to our reality. So we'll see what AI has to say, which is cool that stuff is out there. It kind of maybe will drive evolution in some way. So it's kind of cool that we can already play with it. And I think that's going to be one of the key messages as we finish up is, try some of this stuff, because the more you engage with it as a PMO, the more you can then support your business in having those conversations. Then somebody saying that AI would be a brilliant partner in data mining for feed study costs, which could save a lot of time when contacting suppliers and finding the right people for it. Some validation of what we talked about around we see Prince 2 as a framework, and the APM, like the PMI, also has a body of knowledge and therefore is again different from Prince 2. And then just people saying that this has been really useful, so that's good. I think I'm paraphrasing because it's been quite busy on the questions, which is really good. So I think, to finish off, I think, what does the future of PMO look like? For me, there are some key things that we've talked about that we need to get our head around from PMOs. If we're going to really adapt to support our organizations for the future, in 2024, start having a play with AI and how we use data. Can we use data more effectively in a smarter way? Can we use AI to start, looking at how we do certain processes and things like that? So it's scary, it's change. We know that change inherently, brings a little bit of trepidation, but go and play with it. You can do that in a very safe space. Nowadays, you don't have to send lots of data out there, but go and have a play. The focus on people, I think, is going to be key in 2024. I think we are still, many of us, working from home, but we're losing. The thing that we've lost, I think, is the human connection. And that's really important, as John said, that, humans deliver projects, so we have to put our humans front and center. So certainly when I talk to PMOs, I say get rid of the word project manager, sponsor, team member, and just call them customers. And if you do that, if you reframe your conversation and you acknowledge that actually the PMO has customers and we're working for them, then it really reframes that relationship. So, and that always really helps to create that good mindset. And then I think benefits realization is going to continue to grow in terms of what does the future look like. Being pragmatic, don't just revert to type and add in all the layers. Prince2, all of the methods are supposed to be tailored to your reality, so keep tailoring. Don't just automatically revert to what we did 3 or 4 years ago. Sustainability, think about how we can have more responsible conversations and how we can drive different outcomes in certain cases. And last but not least, team development. So not just PMO, look at the different layers. Everybody needs a little bit of education across the whole organization when it comes to projects. And I think PMOs we're real integrators. We integrate like people and knowledge and wisdom together. So I think we're in a unique position to be able to really drive that conversation. Would you agree with that, John? Do you think we've covered just about all the big stuff that's going to come up in 2024?
I think so. I think that's a great shopping list there, isn't it? And just add to think strategically. Even if you're not in a position at the moment to influence as much as you'd like to, think in that way, develop that mindset. There's an old saying of don't dress for the job you've got, dress for the job you want. And
Amazing.
Think in that way as well about how can we become more strategic? How can we engage in that sustainability at that level, or whatever the aspect is?
That's advice for life, definitely, not just PMOs. But yeah, I think that's a great note to finish on. So I want to say thank you so much, John, for taking the time today and just talking to us about what the future might look like. We haven't just talked about PMO, which I think is great because it isn't just, PMOs, we enable things to happen. So I think it's good that we've kind of gone in different directions. Thank you so much for joining. I know you're all really busy. Remember your shopping list for Father Christmas, and we wish you all a very happy new year, and we'll see you in the future. Thank you very much for joining.
Thanks. Bye-bye.